I'm actually a UNC graduate. I came here a long time ago. Not that long ago. But 1789 is actually an important year. It's an important year because 1789 was the year this university was founded as the first public university in the United States. For the first time, anyone, regardless of whether they were super rich or not, could get an education and be exposed to new ideas. Good ideas, bad ideas, but could be exposed to those ideas and also present those new ideas to the world. In that same year, the Founding Fathers started work on the Bill of Rights. And in that Bill of Rights was the First Amendment, which gave everyone the right to free speech. And so today I'm going to ask you a question. When you encounter speech that you disagree with, what will you do? Let me take you through some of my experiences in that world. Great ideas come from all kinds of places. And universities are a great place to foster great ideas. I was lucky to actually be exposed to some of those, both here in college at UNC, and then afterwards. One of those great ideas, though, was that free speech should be protected on the internet. In the early 1990s, this was not considered a great idea. This was considered by many a bad idea, because free speech would mean that Nazis would get protected, would mean that the KKK would get protected, and that all kinds of bad people would get protected. Activists like myself, though, believed that free speech needed to exist everywhere. And when the government decided to challenge free speech, we took the government to court. On the night before we were to start our case, one of the lawyers from the ACLU asked us if we were going to be comfortable protecting the speech of Nazis, protecting the speech of the KKK, and of other terrible people. It was a tough situation, a real truth or dare moment. Were we willing to protect ideas that we hated? I called one of my teachers because those were dangerous ideas. They could wreck the world. And so one of the great teachers that I had here at UNC was a gentleman by the name of Chuck Stone. And Chuck was the real deal. He had been a Tuskegee Airman. He was with Martin Luther King on the March of Washington and throughout the civil rights movement. He had worked in Congress. He was the first African-American man working as a White House correspondent. And he defended ideas that he disagreed with a passion that was just unmatched. And in my discussion with him, he asked me what I wanted to do. And when I told him that I was really worried about what those bad ideas could do to the world, he told me that the only way to defeat a bad idea is to replace it with a better one. Now, we took our case all the way to the Supreme Court. And to make a long story short, we won. We not only won, but we won in a 9-0 decision. It is rare for Supreme Court justices to agree on anything. But 9 Supreme Court justices agreed that the First Amendment should expand fully to the internet because censorship was largely outweighed by freedom of expression and that by encouraging freedom of expression. That censoring ideas, whether they are good or bad, was not the right approach to the internet. Now, you'd say, yay, congratulations, you won. But I was to be challenged again. On the morning of 9/11, I was in New York City, sitting at a window overlooking the World Trade Center. my office mate next door had told me that a plane had hit the World Trade Center, and we were looking at the plume of smoke coming from the North Tower. We were trying to figure out what was going on. There was a lot of confusion. Just as the second plane hit, and at that point we knew that everything had changed. We saw people jump out of those buildings. Then the first tower came down. Then the second. With our own eyes, not through a screen, not in any mediated fashion. We were witness, like millions of New Yorkers on that day, to the worst atrocities one could face. We lost people that day. And a few years later, one of the major parties decided to have its presidential convention in New York City. Now, New York City doesn't have the best record when it comes to protecting free speech. And conventions tend to bring along with them merchant of ideas left and right, all over the spectrum. Some of those ideas were great, or ideas that I would agree with. Some of those ideas were ideas that I would substantially disagree with. But because New York did not have the best track record, and because the police tended to arrest people first and ask questions later, I decided to volunteer as an ACLU monitor. The role of an ACLU monitor is simple, air quotes. You stand between the protesters and the police, and you try to make sure that the protest can happen. It means a lot of negotiation, and it also means that everyone on both sides hates your guts. One of the group of protesters were 911 truthers, people who believed that what happened on September 11th had not happened, that it was a hoax that the government had made up. A bad idea, an objectively bad idea. And yet my dispatcher told me, oh, you know what, they're protesting at Ground Zero and they need someone to stand there as an ACLU monitor to protect their right to free speech and free assembly. Can I go somewhere? Can you assign somewhere else? I asked. And he told me, no one wants to go. Because the truth was that all the people that were sitting there as ACLU monitors were New Yorkers like myself. The vast majority of us had been there on that day. We knew that this was objectively a bad idea, and yet it needed protection. Because no one else would go, I was dumb enough to go, fine, I'll do it. I got down there to Ground Zero. The new towers had not been built, so it was an open construction site. And the cops were there, and the cops were mad. I mean, they had lost friends in those towers. They were ready to bust those guys and really kick the living hell out of them. I went to the captain, and I asked him one simple question. How many? He gave me a number. 13, I replied. In that instant, we created the connection that every New Yorker had at that moment, which was an understanding that we were there on that day, and we didn't have to speak about anything else. And he asked me, so what do you want to do? And I told him, well, they've got a right to free speech, and they've got a right to free assembly. So you can't bust them. You're weird, he said. I was like, yeah, but here's the deal. If you bust them, there's going to be coverage. They're going to be on the news, maybe TV, maybe newspapers. They're going to reach tens of thousands of people. If you don't bug them, they're going to reach out the people that are walking here back and forth. And there's this open construction site right here that's reminding everyone of what happened on that day. So So anyone that's going to be walking back and forth, they're not going to have much of an impact with. That said, while their speech is protected, and while their right to free assembly is protected, their right to a bullhorn isn't. Freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. And it is a very important distinction. They went on, they had their little protest, and today I would assume that most of you never heard that there is a conspiracy theory about 9/11, and that's a great thing. Today, though, there is this view that we should cancel dangerous ideas, that we should just censor them and make them kind of go away, that we shouldn't even explore them. But I go back to what Chuck told me, that the only way to replace a bad idea is to replace it with a better idea. Canceling it doesn't make it go away. There was an idea that was really considered bad when those founding fathers were writing the Declaration of Independence. So bad, in fact, that while they did put it in the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, the idea of banning slavery was completely written out. It was crossed out. It's interesting when you look at Jefferson's early drafts, it's right there, and by the third or fourth draft, there's a long line over it, and it doesn't appear in the final document. It took 2% of the US population to resolve that question through the Civil War, because we weren't willing to engage with an idea that wasn't popular at the time. Now today, there's this belief that if you're engaging with an idea, you believe in that idea. But you can read Mein Kampf without becoming a Nazi. You can read the Communist Manifesto without becoming a communist. But if you don't engage with either of those, you cannot defeat the ideas that are embedded into those documents because you do not understand them. And universities and democracies are the place where you need to engage with those bad ideas in order to defeat them. So my question to you is, the next time you encounter an idea that you disagree with, will you decide to suppress it, or will you decide to replace it? Thank you.